Morning, class. So, remember last week we talked about ecosystems? Remember what they are? Yes. An ecosystem is a level of organization of earthly life, and it includes everything, living and non living, that interacts with each other in a given area or environment. Remember what a food chain is? The flow of energy from the original source, usually the sun, to the organism that doesn't get eaten by anything. The end of the chain, right? Well, today, we're going to take the knowledge one step further and discuss how changes in something called a food web can affect the entire ecosystem. A food web is similar to a food chain. However, it shows how plants and animals are connected in many ways to help them all survive. Basically, it's just a food chain on a larger scale. While a food chain just follows one path, like sun to plant to animal to human, for example, a food web shows how many different types of food chains are all connected. For example, a tree might make acorns, which is the producer, right? Well, mice, squirrels, and insects eat this food, and because there are a lot of mice, because the mice have a lot of food, weasels, snakes, and raccoons would all have a lot of food too, because there's a lot of mice. Now, we talked about the path in which the mice belong. Sun to tree to acorn to mice. Then weasels, snakes, raccoons, stuff like that, right? But we can't forget about the insects that use the acorns for food too, right? Well, because there are a lot of acorns, there are a lot of insects. And because there are a lot of insects, there's a lot of food for birds, as birds eat those insects. And because there's a lot of food for birds, there are a lot of birds. And because there are a lot of birds, there's a lot of food for other predators, like foxes that eat birds also. So you see, class, when we eliminate even just one thing from the food web, say the acorn for instance, look how much everything else is affected. All of these things, even though many of them are carnivorous animals and would never ever use an acorn for food, are really affected just by a decline in the amount of acorns. If there is less food for animals that eat the acorns, there will be fewer of those animals, which then means less food for organisms that eat that animal, and on down the line. Get it? Now, the same can be said about pretty much every area of the food web, class. If the amount of something changes in an ecosystem, everything that is even kind of related to it, which we can tell by the food web, changes also. Now lastly, there are many ways in which a change in the food web can occur. How do you think many of these do occur? Well, let's think about it. We live in a city here in New Orleans, right? Well, this city certainly has not been here forever. There was a time in which this was all swampy, rural area, infested with tons and tons of life that we no longer have here. The reason for the drastic change in the ecosystem is a change in the food web. By constructing lots of buildings, houses, roads, things like that, humans totally changed the amount of available food, especially those from plants and trees, by cutting down lots of plants and trees. And that drastically changed the landscape of the ecosystem. Pretty crazy, huh?